Hi, everybody. Welcome into Hardcore Penn State Football. Today we are checking the temperature of every position group at Penn State. Are things hot? Are things cold? And we'll explain which one maybe is better or worse. Penn State got a new commit. We'll talk about that. And we'll wrap up with some fan questions. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe to the video on YouTube. And if you're listening on audio only, please make sure you are subscribed to whatever podcast you're listening to. Let's get into the show. Welcome into Hardcore Penn State Football. I'm Corey Lestochi. With me, as always, the great Shawn Kane. How are you doing today, Shawn?
Not too bad, Corey. Super Bowl's coming up. Did you watch the Grammys last night?
You know, it's funny because I don't ever watch them, and I just happened to watch them last night. Probably the first time I watched the Grammys in I don't even know how long.
I've never watched the Grammys, but my fiance was like, my fiance brought it up, and I was like, yeah, I'll watch it. And I watched, and I was like, wow, this is actually really, really good, which surprised me because I watch the Oscars sometimes, and I don't know. I think the Oscars usually aren't that impressive, but I don't know. I was pretty entertained throughout the whole night, so I think they actually did a good job with it. And then Super Bowl coming up.
I think musicians are naturally funnier, and also it's a better crowd than I feel like the actor crowd is.
Yeah, they take themselves less seriously.
Right, and I think that helps a little bit. But I did watch it. I love the joke about every time Taylor Swift is mentioned, panning it to a former football player. I thought that was pretty good. And Shawn, we just had Groundhog's Day, which is one of my favorite holidays. Early spring, which is on par for what we're hoping Penn State will be doing, as they have officially kicked off winter workouts, and spring ball is just around the corner. We're just over 2 months away from blue and white. So, Shawn, winter workouts have started, and that also means that the position coaches on Twitter all tweet a competitor of the day every day, and I am gonna 100% read into the tea leaves every single time. We should maybe keep a tracker this year. Should we do that? Maybe I'll go ahead and do that. I'll get a tracker going. We can keep track of it somewhere on who wins the most for every position group. That might be a fun idea.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Last year I remember Drew Aller won it once. So I wonder why.
Biela won it a bunch.
Yeah. Yeah, wonder why. But yeah, that'd be a cool idea, Corey, if you could get a tracker going. It's always the thing with that is I always like to see how the young guys compete. Like sometimes you'll see a freshman win it or a redshirt freshman win it. And it's usually always a good sign. A guy that I'll be looking to see, if they could get player of the day is, and how much does it mean? Doesn't mean much, but Jameel Lyons. Like if it shows that you could make an impact, and if DDS wins it one day, I'll be like, yeah, it's DDS. But a guy like Jameel Lyons, one of those young guys, maybe one of those cornerbacks, that'll be a very competitive room to watch. So I think it could give us some early indication on where everybody is fitting in there.
I will say this too. Sometimes it doesn't mean anything, but correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like Anthony Dunca did win it a couple times last year. And for the average fan, they're like, who the hell is Anthony Dunca? But for those that have been listening, Anthony Dunca, and we're going to probably end up talking about, we have a fan question in relation to this kind of, but he came in kind of like the offensive lineman people weren't talking about, except for us, because we liked him a lot. And he worked his way into playing a bunch in the Peach Bowl. So a year later, those winter workouts kind of proved to be at least the beginning of a really good season for Anthony Dunca on his first year on campus.
Yeah, and the other thing to check for these winter workouts is a lot of times leadership gets the leaders start emerging from the winter, and the seniors, a lot of them have left and graduated, and pretty much everybody who's declaring for the draft is declared. So this will be a good, gauge to see where everybody is fitting in from a leadership perspective, in my opinion. Number one guy that you immediately think of is Julian Fleming and how he's going to be fitting in that receiver room. And I'm certainly expecting him to maybe win Player of the Day a few times here.
Yeah, I think Liam Clifford won it today for the wide receivers. So that doesn't really inspire confidence into me. Again, day one here, February 5th, but I already know Liam Clifford can work hard. You know what I mean? I feel like they should separate the people we already know who work hard and the people that we still, not that they're not hard workers, we just haven't necessarily seen that yet. I think that they should maybe make that separation. Like, sorry, Liam Clifford, you can't win Popabila, you can't win Competitor of the Day because we know you're already competing really well. Sorry.
Liam,
I don't know, like who else be on that list? Probably like a Vandenberg. I think he won it quite a bit last year.
Basically, if you have some grit, you're a lunch pail guy.
Yeah. Devon Ellie's probably still in that camp as well.
Yeah.
So
Kobe King.
I will say this too. Like Zariah Fischer, I think, is another one of those guys that we know works hard based off of coming back from the injury. I mean, just remember, Zariah Fischer was a guy who Franklin originally had said, hey, he's not even going to be able to come back for a whole year. Like he's already done for the season, and he came back and he competed 2 years ago. So then he made a splash even with how many great defensive ends we had last year. So he won it today, and I feel like that's somebody you really need to pay attention to. I just love the defensive end still. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, not to give it away too much, but I still love the defensive ends. Hard to replace a Chop Robinson from a tangible perspective, and hard to replace a Adisa Isaac from an intangible perspective, although he's got some good tangibles too. But I think they're going to be okay there. And I think Zariah Fischer is one of the reasons why.
Yeah. Defensive end, I think that's going to be a real opportunity not to rebuild, but to reload. And there's a difference. And I think you're going to have guys ready to step in. And am I saying we're going to lead the country in sacks this year? No. But do I think they could be top 10, top 5? Sure. It all depends on how everything works out, and how guys mature, and of course injuries and staying healthy. So yeah, this is still going to be a room that I think it's going to cause a lot of chaos on the field. So I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Not trying to get to what we're talking about mostly today, but yeah, I mean, winter workouts are fun, right? It's a fun way to see. The only other thing I'll say about the winter workouts, they posted like a little video today. Penn State Football did of the highlights of the session this morning. And one thing at the very end, James Franklin, during I don't know if it was before or after they had started, but to his speech to the team, mentioned being a player-led team. And, we've said this before, but the best teams are player-led. And I don't know how player-led last year's team was. And, we spoke about this after the 2022 season, that you had so many great leaders on that 2022 team. There was going to be some sort of leadership drop-off. I mean, that wasn't even a knock on the 2023 guys, but you just had so many great leaders in 2022's team. It was going to be a leadership drop in 2023. Now, I will say this. I think they absolutely, even some of the guys that are returning, now show better leadership qualities that I think are going to be great leaders. I think of the Devon Ellies of the world. I think now that Kobe King has kind of solidified himself as that Mike, I think he's starting to show some leadership there. On the offensive side, Drew Aller now is a second-year starter. He's got to be a leader for them. You mentioned Julian Fleming already. that could be huge from the receiver core perspective. And you get Ty Warren back in that tight end room. So you've got some more established leadership, even if they weren't necessarily amazing leaders last year. Some people aren't natural leaders, or maybe just aren't fantastic leaders right away. Leadership is a skill. And yes, some people have it and some people don't, but you can learn to become a better leader. And I like where they're at more this year from a leadership perspective, just on the things I know, Shawn, than compared to where we were heading into the year last year.
Yeah, because last year I remember sitting here last year at this time, and I had no idea who the leaders were going to be on this team. And now, like you said, you have guys you can point to: Devon Allies, Liam Clifford, Julian Fleming, all those guys that you mentioned, Tyler Warren, I think are all candidates to be guys that could step up. And some of them have already shown that they can step up into leadership roles. So I don't think it's as big of a question this year. Is it still, do I feel like this is 2022 squad caliber and leadership? I think it's way too soon to tell that, but I do think that I do think that there's potential here, and I definitely and last year too. I think this was the same way. Like, there was never a hint in the entire locker room, at least, of toxicity. And that's very important, because there have been, times at Penn State, but every school, that locker rooms can get toxic, and it just takes a few guys to make the whole room toxic. And I don't really think there was that last year. I mean, there were some whispers with the receivers. But that's,
say there's a little bit more than whispering, but yeah.
Yeah. But like, as a whole, do I think that is the case with the whole team? No. Yeah, so there wasn't that much toxicity, and I think there'll be even less this year with having Julian Fleming there. I think we're all putting a lot of stock in Julian Fleming, mostly from a leadership perspective. And while I think he's going to be good on the field, I think he's going to be even better behind the scenes, and the things that the fans don't see.
Yeah, I mean, outside of the wide receiver room, I'd say things weren't toxic, but I can't, I don't think necessarily that receivers were toxic to one another. And it's hard to judge, right, without being there.
Yeah. That's fair too.
Were they just frustrated that they were always a scapegoat, right? Like, at what point is it someone else's fault? I don't know. Like, it's a hard conversation to have, because nothing happens in a vacuum. A football team, someone's success is not because of just themselves 99% of the time. You have those 1% where someone does something amazing. But, I mean, it's not just the receivers. It's not just the quarterback. It's not just the offensive coordinator, typically. And Penn State recognized that. I mean, look, you lost the offensive coordinator, Mike Yurcich, yet you haven't seen any high profile wide receivers leave. I mean, you lost Christian Driver, you lost Mason Stahl, you lost Dante Cephas, which I guess kind of a high profile guy in him, but not unexpected by any means. But Keandre Lambert-Smith stays. Omari Evans stays. Liam Clifford stays. Caden Saunders stays. Those for now, that's true. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in the spring? You're right. But those, like, that to me it must not have been that bad of a situation where they were trying to take the first train out of state college. And I think that means something, right? I mean, it seems like they're at least willing to battle, which that's what you want. You want guys that are willing to go in and at least compete and try to get better. And so we'll see what happens.
And that is a good sign. You're right. That they weren't immediately outdoor. Like, you look around at different programs, and there are teams that didn't have coaching changes, mind you, that had 26 guys in the portal. I mean, what does that say about that program that they were at? I mean, I think you could make a few conclusions. Maybe some NIL deals went bad, and maybe some, obviously maybe coordinator changes. But Penn State had a coordinator change. They had two of them, and I feel like they did a pretty good job keeping the band together, at least through the winter. And will there be some attrition in the spring? Probably. It's just kind of a natural part of college football at this point. But I don't think there'll be as much. I should say this. There's usually not as much in the spring as there is right after the season ends, usually. But do I expect another receiver to hit the portal? Probably. And I don't think it won't knock a feather out of me. I also think we're going to probably add one through the portal in the spring. So
if you're going to leave, right, and if you're going to leave in the spring, you got to be really good. I mean, because now you're not going to get another chance until fall camp to really prove yourself. So if you're going to go somewhere, you kind of have to know that you're going to land somewhere. If you're going to go into portal, you got to have to know that you're going to end up somewhere. I don't know what the numbers are, but I'd be very curious to see the percentage of players who land with a new team coming out of the season portal entry versus after the spring ball. I would venture to say more people land with a new team after the season has ended versus coming out of spring ball. I feel like you got to know where you want to go coming out of spring. Otherwise, you might be stuck with nobody.
Yeah, like guys in the spring that have left. Chop Robinson, who was a 5-star prospect out of high school and had played a little bit his freshman year, made a little bit of an impact, but everybody kind of knew he was going to be good. Keon Coleman. Like, these are the caliber of guys that usually, you're right, even spring, because there's just a lot less certainty. Like, teams, like I said before, they tend to have less attrition in the spring rather than right after the season ends. So what does that mean? Well, you have less spots to fill. So eventually it becomes like a musical chairs thing, and eventually everybody's chair gets taken, and then you go from playing at a school like Penn State thinking you're going to go to another Big Ten school or an ACC school, and you end up in the MAC. So there are always,
if you're lucky.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because those schools, they still have the 85 scholarship limit too. So I mean, it's just one of those things that you have to be very careful of. And that's part of the problem with the portal in general, is that I don't think these guys necessarily are always educated enough, have educated enough to make educated enough decisions, I should say, when they dive into that portal. Because yes, a lot of guys, they find success there, but more guys than not, more guys don't than do, if that makes sense.
Let's switch the topic a little bit. I want to, before we get into the new commit, one other thing kind of came across the news desk this week, and that was the Super League is officially starting, Shawn. A new exploratory leader committee, whatever you want to call it, formed between the SEC and the Big Ten. Some are saying the beginning of Power 2. Some are saying it's not too much of a big deal yet. I would personally, if you want news without overreacting, I would recommend Matt Brown with his newsletter. He does a really good job. Not the Matt Brown from The Athletic. Other Matt Brown, very knowledgeable in the world of athletic directors. He does a lot of stuff for NCAA Football 14 news. He is usually not just right about things, but he usually doesn't report news until he knows it's 100% true, which I appreciate. He said some stuff about how much you should really read into the tea leaves about what that means. But I mean, I think it's different than, say, the alliance that the Pac-12 and the ACC and Big Ten had, right? Like, everybody knows, right? I mean, it's been this way for a while, but it's gotten even more drastic in the last couple of years now with Oregon, Washington, UCLA, Texas, USC, and Oklahoma joining those two conferences, you have even more of a reason to think those are the two best conferences, and we're going towards something that's looking like a two conference league. What are your thoughts on it, Shawn? I mean, I don't know how much we're going to see necessarily right away, but these sort of moves and this sort of news and the conference realignment sort of comes out of nowhere, right? And this is the beginning of that time where things start randomly happening. So, curious what your thoughts are on it.
It's hard to say at this point, right? Because you look at it, and I think there is among college football fans in general a feeling that this is inevitably going to happen, right? That there's going to be an AFC and an NFC, and they're just going to be the Big Ten and the SEC, and that's it. Those are the Power 5 teams, and you just wonder, well, what happens to the Big 12 and the ACC? And my thought is the ACC, all their big programs, pretty much Clemson. Well, both their two biggest programs, Clemson and Florida State. Florida State's very open about wanting to get out of the ACC, and Clemson, there have been whispers about them wanting to get out too. And as soon as they both go, that's it. The ACC's done. The Big 12, which I think you have to give the Big 12 commissioner a lot of credit actually for pulling something presentable together after losing Texas and Oklahoma. How long are they gonna last? Like if the ACC folds and you're out there on an island with these two gigantic conferences with all of the marquee programs, like eventually you're gonna be like, well, it doesn't make financial sense for us to stay around, and you're gonna be divvied up. So I think that's coming eventually, whether people like it or not. And I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not saying it's going to happen next year and 5 years, but probably 10-ish years. That's what it's going to be. And I don't really know if I like it, but I mean, I think you could make an argument the beginning of this was the Big Ten getting USC and UCLA, because that was the first time that one of those two major conferences went so far out of their region to grab two teams. And now you're going to have games where Rutgers is playing at USC and at UCLA, and it's just not what college football was, but I think this is just going to be what it is. And of course, the thing that, I mean, college football could handle it, but we're going to run into problems with that. And this opens up a whole other conversation, is the baseball teams and the softball teams that have to spend 4 days out in Oregon. And then they have to spend 4 days out in State College. I think that's where you're going to run into some real problems. And then that brings up what Chip Kelly said, just make football its own thing. And I definitely agree with that. I think it's needed.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that needs to be separated 100%. You know, the other part of this too is not just those weird matchups between Rutgers and USC, but also the teams that are going to be left in the dust, right? Not everyone is going to be playing for big boy football anymore. That's just the nature of it. And it's going to be very interesting to see how the pie is sliced, but someone's going to be left in the dust. And is it, if you told me 20 years ago, is that good for college football? Probably not. But now, like, what choice do you really have? We're already past that point, in my opinion, of return. We already are to the point where the Western Michigans, the App States of the world, hell, even really good football teams, the Navies of the world, historically good football teams, are going to probably be left behind. And I don't know that, like, we talked about this a little bit last episode. For me personally, it makes me less of a college football fan. Like, I'm still gonna like Penn State football, but like that stinks in my opinion. That not everybody is gonna necessarily get to root for their team necessarily for the same thing. The only saving grace would be as if we went to some sort of relegation system, which I don't think is ever going to happen. One other part of this, Shawn, too, that needs to be mentioned is the Big Ten and the SEC basically said, we don't really care what the NCAA thinks. They have completely said, we are going to make our own rules if we need to. And at the end of the day, we can do whatever we want. There's nothing stopping us. The NCAA is continuing to lose all power. I don't know if people are following along what's happening in Tennessee, but the NCAA is losing all sorts of jurisdiction in the matter of college football. And the money is so big that the minute these TV folk decide that the NCAA is costing them money, it's over. It's done. And I think that's really the beginning of what we're seeing here.
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head with the TV. TV networks run college football now. Like, just period. ESPN runs the SEC. Fox runs the Big Ten. And it didn't really used to be like this prior. I mean, first off, years back, it wasn't like this at all. And now, you saw it with, and I do think Florida State fans have to let it go, but you saw it with ESPN pushing Bama for 12 hours straight after the ACC and SEC championship games. Like, you saw it then. Like, oh, wow, they're just all going to mobilize to get the SEC team in. And I fully think that Fox would have done the same thing for Ohio State or Michigan, because this is just what it is now. And it's, if it makes financial sense for the ACC and the Big 12 to just become largely irrelevant, then that's what's going to happen. And I think their expiration date is approaching. And I mean, you already saw it happen with the Pac-12. I think the worst part of the Pac-12 breaking up, in my opinion, as at least with football, is like Oregon and Oregon State aren't going to get to play anymore. Washington and Washington State aren't going to get to play anymore. So I just kind of think that sucks when you lose old rivalries like that.
Yeah, well, let's get away from the depressing conversation and move to a more exciting conversation. And that is Penn State has a new commit. I used to play some music here. I should probably get back to playing some sort of music here. Shawn, would you like to do the honors of the new commit?
Of course, yeah. It's Alex Tatch. He's another guy from out in Western PA in the Pittsburgh area, Latrobe, Greater Latrobe High School. And really, really fun highlight tape to watch. Flies after the ball. Very, very athletic. And Tyler Calvaruso on their podcast for Lions 247 said he thinks that this guy, who hadn't been evaluated until like a couple weeks ago, has a chance to become one of their top 247 prospects. So that just shows you the caliber of guy that we got. I know he was interested quite a bit in Notre Dame, ended up deciding to stay home, and we already have 3 or 4 guys from Western PA now in the Pittsburgh area in this class. So definitely off to a good start out there. A lot of credit to Terry Smith. That's his area. And Penn State just continues to clean up out there. So happy with this commitment. And like I said, fun highlight film. If you wanna watch them, it's on his Huddle. So definitely check that out.
I'm not going to be negative right away because I agree with everything you said.
Oh boy.
Second linebacker commit in this class. I like him, but Shawn, here's where I get a little bit confused or scared. I'm always a little nervous and hesitant with these kids from these smaller schools that aren't necessarily playing to the same level of competition. You watch Alex's film, and he's probably one of, if not the best player on the field, which it's not his fault, but I get those just those vibes of, okay, what happens when we see better competition? Does it hold up? Now, the silver lining here is that Penn State had him on the board for a while and has recently really gone after him. And, sometimes they're more aggressive with the outer state guys and they can kind of fall back on some of these in-state players. Not the case here. Man, there's still some Penn State linebacker targets out there for the 2025 class, and they wanted him on board right away. So that means they must really like what they've seen. He hasn't camped for them, so they don't have like official time or anything for him. So I'll be curious. I mean, there's no reason he doesn't get out and camp multiple times. Like talk about Anthony Dunca earlier. He's a perfect example of a guy who went and camped as many times as he could and got better, basically got coaching for free or before he was even on campus. I expect Alex Tash to do the same. But I'm a little concerned just because he was so much better than everyone else. But I am excited just because of how badly Penn State wanted this guy. That makes you feel a little bit better.
Yeah, and it shows you that they probably they must have had a lot of faith in the way he tested because they know all that stuff and what his measurables are. So, especially since they kind of put the full court press on with him. But yeah, your point is a good one. We've seen lots of guys come in, not just here but other places that were biggest fish in a small pond, and then you get here and sometimes you have trouble finding your way a little bit, but they must have had a lot of faith in what they saw with testing and things of that nature. So yeah, I think it's a good pickup, and it's another top 10 guy in the state of Pennsylvania that's coming, staying at home.
Yeah, somebody had a good tweet. I think it was actually a Pittsburgh media member mentioning how many top players from the Pittsburgh area have gone to Penn State, and Pitt's basically not gotten any of them, or very little of them for the last, 4 or 5 classes. So good to see you there. We did have a comment from Robert Bosfield, and he says about the conference realignment and where college football is going. He says, it's all Notre Dame's fault. With their NBC contract, then everyone wanted a piece of that. I blame the Golden Domers for everything. And I think Shawn would probably agree with that.
Amen.
Just blame Notre Dame.
Fault. Yep.
Just always blame Notre Dame. Yeah, and just to wrap up on Tatch, that is number 9, I believe, in the class of 2025. And so we're off and running, Shawn. I mean, just a second ago, it was like, oh, there was only a handful of people in that class, and now we're off and running.
Number 9.
Shawn,
Revolution 9.
Yeah, I got you. I was just ready to mention to you, that although we've had a commit in this class, I think everybody should be making sure they're committing to making sure they have the right health insurance. Are you paying too much for health insurance? Too busy to read long, complicated policies? Meet Patrick Motti of Motti Health, a former Penn State letterman and your new health insurance coach. Patrick leverages years of expertise to offer customized insurance solutions to help you develop a coverage game plan that secures your family's health and future. As a father, Patrick understands the importance of reliable health coverage for your family. From individual plans to family coverage, Patrick ensures you get the best protection for your health and your budget. Motti Health, one broker, endless solutions. Now offering up to a $500 cash bonus for every customer referral. So quit overpaying for health insurance. Visit MottiHealth.com to schedule a free consultation with Patrick today. Did I give away? Did I show my cards a little bit that time, Shawn?
I mean, I think you're just psyched about Motti Health, and you just wanted to tell everybody about it for no reason at all, and I don't blame you. Did you
Just
say
fire it up.
Maudy? Did you say MaudyHealth.com?
I did.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yes. Go see Patrick.
And former Penn State letterman, correct?
Yeah. What else do you need? Who else could you trust?
I trust Penn State letterman, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I trust him more than I trust myself.
Me too. Yeah, you should see me looking at health insurance policies. It's a pretty sad sight.
I think I've bragged on this show about how good my health insurance is, but that's neither here nor there.
I think you did too.
Anywho,
we'll let it go.
Let's check the temp of the Penn State football team, Shawn.
So
how we're gonna do this? I guess we hadn't really decided officially. I was thinking, hot is maybe bad, closer to having a fever, and you could go the other way and like, man, that guy's really hot right now. But I think it's because it's not in season. I could say like, oh yeah, Aller's hot, like he's playing really well. But since we're out of season, I would say as a position group, you do not want to be having a fever right now. Maybe think of it as you're checking your own temperature about how you feel about those position groups, if you need to do it that way.
And then you don't want hypothermia either, so you just want a good temperature.
Okay, I didn't think about it. Okay, that's fair enough. I'll let you kind of go whatever way you want with that, Shawn. Let's start with the kickers. Cold, hot, where you at?
Feeling pretty cool. I do I think the transfer that we got, I think he's gonna
who's the transfer again, Shawn?
His name's escaping me right now. Yeah, but I know he
should I give you a hint, or do you want to try to figure it out on your own?
Give me a hint.
How do I say this? I guess it's not. I was going to say he has two first names, but that's not really the case. If I tagged you and you were it, you would then what after me?
I would Chase Meyer.
There you go.
Yes, Chase Meyer, who had a very good career at Tulsa. I think he's going to be the favorite to take over there, and he. Unless Sanders Zaheda could show something here. It's going to be, I think it's Chase Meyer's job to lose right now. And that's a guy that, as much as I could trust kickers, because I can never fully trust kickers, I feel like I'm going to be able to trust him. So right now I feel pretty cool, and cool being a good thing about it. So I feel like a good temperature with kicker right now.
I just wanted to make sure that who the special teams competitor of the day was, but it was neither kicker. So just wanted to see where that was at. I'll just say I'm a little bit, I guess, hotter about it than you, just because I don't like having a new starting kicker. Now, I think this is something I have to get over, because we could theoretically go into transfer portal every year for the end of time. So maybe that's the better way to do it. Just get an established person. I don't know.
Seems to be what Franklin's trending toward.
Yeah. I mean, why waste a scholarship on something you don't know for sure when you can go get a transfer portal guy that you know has at least done it to a certain degree at another level. Let's go punter. I'm pretty cool about this one. I'm cool as the other side of the pillow. Really happy about where Riley Thompson is. I think he was one of those kind of didn't win a Hardy Award this past January, but I was a nominee. Could have voted for him. I thought he was a really good unsung. Maybe he was the unsung hero of the Hardys. Maybe he was a Samwise Gamgee of the Hardys. I don't know.
I think he's a good early nominee for that for 2024. Yeah, we're going to be good at punter as long as Riley Thompson's here, and he's going to be here at least this year, probably 2025 as well. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty cool about Riley Thompson.
Shawn, just let you know. I mean, I don't want to rush you or make you feel like you have to get it done. But 1 month is in a book. Have you watched Lord of the Rings yet?
No.
Okay. I mean, that's fine. And yeah, obviously have plenty of time.
It's still football season.
I just want to put that on your radar because I just don't want you to forget. At 1 month, it's going to go fast. We're going to be back here in January again, and we'll just figure it out when we get there. Let's go to safeties. Shawn, how are you feeling about the safeties?
Yeah, I'm still feeling pretty cool about them. KJ Winston, I think it starts with him. He's next. Been saying that for a while. I think he played at sometimes an elite level last year. I think you're going to see a pretty consistent elite level this season. Jalen Reed, who's who's it? I always get him. It's Jalen Reed. There's a Jaden Reed. Yeah. Veteran. Jalen. I always confuse him with the Michigan State guy.
Michigan State guy.
Now Packer.
Yes.
Yeah, Jalen Reed. He's been a mainstay since 2021. So, two guys that you trust, and then you feel good about the guys behind them, right? Zeki Wheatley has played a lot of football at Penn State. And then a guy that hasn't played a ton yet, but I still think has a lot of talent, and Mekhi Flowers. I think you're going to see more of him this year, and I feel good about him. I liked him coming out of high school. I just kind of think he got lost in a very, very competitive room, but he was also one of those guys I was keeping an eye on for potential transfer, but he did not transfer, which was a very good sign because I think he's got a lot of ability, and I think he can make a good impact here as soon as this season.
That's a good point, Shawn. Yeah, Wheatley's still there too. Yeah, that's a good point. I like the safeties. I'm feeling really good about the safeties. Let me just switch it up on you completely. Let's go quarterback.
Oh boy.
Only because I didn't realize we were talking about how Beau Pribula won the competitor of the day like almost every time last year. Well, he won the first one this time too. I don't know if you saw that or not, but he did win competitor of the day. Beau Pribula did. So,
was there a boot?
What? That was June-ish?
No, that was right around now.
Oh, was it that long ago?
Yeah.
Or
maybe March.
Danny O'Brien, by the way, was the one tweeting that. He is like his thing says quarterbacks coach, so.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
I guess that's your quarterbacks coach.
That's what it says in his bio, quarterbacks coach. So, where are you at with the quarterback, Shawn?
Warmer than the other positions we've named so far. Look, I mean, we talked a lot about Drew Aller last year. Just wasn't good enough, especially against better teams. And we're going to need more from him. And it's very easy to dump on everything else that was around him. But I do think the quarterback, needs to be held accountable too. And I'm fairly confident that within Lash, he is being held accountable, and it's got to happen. He's got to be better. And again, was it that I hated everything I saw from him last year? No. I mean, just looking at his touchdown to interception ratio, it's impressive, and he was a 10 win guy as a first year starter. But I mean, the teams we played outside of three of them really weren't that great, and he lost to all three of those teams. So yeah, we need more. So definitely warmer temperature on the quarterbacks than the other few positions that we named so far. But I'm not ready to throw in the towel or anything here. Also, I just want to point this out too, because this is a big year for Drew Aller. This is a big year for the quarterbacks, because let's say we lose 2 or 3 games again, and Drew looks like he did last year. I think there could be some hard conversations to be had between coaching staff and Drew.
The safety net's gone. Yeah, I mean, there's no. Oh, he's got time to develop. I mean, it's now, right? I mean, in my opinion, they did it perfectly. Like they gave him the year behind, a really experienced backup, got a chance to learn the ropes, then got a year, had good running backs, had good tight ends, had a really good defense. Just you didn't have to worry about doing too much. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better situation. So I guess you could have asked for maybe an Allen Robinson. But otherwise, besides the receivers, you couldn't have asked for a better situation. And so the training wheels are off and things you got to start pedaling. Otherwise, you're going to, well, at least skid your knee on the pavement, if not worse. So yeah, I agree. I'm pretty hot about the quarterbacks. They've got to find a way here. And we'll see. Andy Kotelnicki comes in. We'll see what happens, what changes, if anything. I think it's more of an attitude, and not that they have a bad attitude. I think it's just a mindset thing. Maybe not an attitude, a mindset thing to be, like you said, Shawn, like wanting to be the best and having a little bit of that toughness, grit that you call it the it factor. I would just say confidence. Come back to confidence.
Same thing. Yep.
Let's go defensive ends.
Cooler than the other side of the pillow. Rest in peace, Stuart Scott. Yeah, we're going to be fine there. We talked a little bit before about how we were feeling about them, but like Dani Dennis-Sutton was third team All Big Ten as a backup last year. And I don't know if I've seen that before with the Penn State player, that a backup was still an All Big Ten caliber guy. I've seen that at places like Georgia, Bama, but not here. And we've had some really good reserve players before, but he really wasn't that. And then you have to also think about Amin Vanover, who's played a lot of football here. Smith Vilbert, who played who played a great Outback Bowl, and we will always talk about that Outback Bowl. But he has a chance to contribute this year too. And if we could get something out of Smith Vilbert, I mean, awesome. Zariah Fischer, who we spoke about. And then the guy that has had a lot of buzz since last season, Jameel Lyons. So there are 4, maybe 5 guys I feel really, really psyched about at defensive end. And I think they're going to be able to fill in very nicely for Chop and Adisa Isaac, who've departed. Now, you do wonder how you have to keep in mind, this is a new defense, and it's a new defensive coordinator, so it's a new guy calling the plays, new system. So there might be a little bit of a learning curve there. But I do think what Tom Allen typically does and what Manny does is pretty similar. They're both rather aggressive defensive coordinators that like to have their guys eat. And I think there'll be a lot of eating to be had among these defensive ends. So, yeah, cooler than the other side of the pillow here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll just take defensive tackles. Also pretty cool. Not as cool as the defensive ends, but feel really good about the defensive tackle position for the first time in a while. If Devon Elliott plays like he did in the last half of the season, we're going to be in a pretty good spot. Zane Durant continues to develop. Feel really good there, and you still got some players behind them as well. So never heard anything about Izzard, so you have Izzard back as well. So you basically have everyone back at defensive tackle. So just another year of everyone getting better as of right now. Again, things could happen this spring, but feel really good about the defensive tackles for the first time in a long time, and they've got different guys that can do different things, which is really nice and gives you some versatility depending on who you're playing. So defensive tackle is also very, very cool. Not as cool as the defensive ends, but still cool.
Yeah, Deion Barnes is back, right? And we saw Deion take this group to another level this year in 2023. And you got to feel pretty confident that he'll be able to keep this train moving here. And yeah, I agree with everything you said about defensive tackle. I think they're poised to have maybe an even better year than last season.
All right, let's go tight ends, Shawn.
Yeah, a lot of talent. A lot of talent. And I think that's where it starts. Tyler Warren, we all know what he could do. Andrew Applier, who and Khalil Dinkins. Khalil Dinkins, I spoke about a lot last year. I think he would have started on probably 11 or 12 teams, and then 14 team Big Ten. And Andrew Rapplier, who I thought was actually going to play a tad more than he did, although he did play. But I think just being behind Theo, being behind Dinkins, and being
I was gonna say,
behind,
give a shout out to Dinkins for that, right? You know what
yeah,
I mean?
he held him off, and that shows you a lot about him. And then you have Luke Reynolds, who everybody and their brother is just psyched out of their minds about, and who it's poised to maybe being able to step in next year and play right away. I'm a little, and this isn't a shot at him, I'm a little less bullish than a lot of people are on how much he's going to play as a freshman, but I do think it's not out of the question that he could burn his red shirt. And Jerry Cross is there, and I think this could be a year where Jerry could take a step forward as well. So, a lot to like at tight end, a real lot to like. So, a lot of credit to Ty Howell and how he's been just developing guys year after year, and it's a lot like Deion Barnes, in that everybody seems to always take a step forward with Ty. So, very cool with the tight ends.
Yeah, probably the best position group. I mean, you got to feel really good from a leadership perspective, about the talent perspective, about the coaching perspective. Yeah, Reynolds, I think, is the interesting one. Joey Schlaffer, too, is a name keep an eye on, right? I mean, everyone talks about Rapplier. We talk about Rapplier. I talk about Rapplier. But if I'm correct, Joey Schlaffer was one actually was here early enrolled last year, not Rapplier. So he's been here now for a whole year. See if that changes things, or he's been there, done that kind of now. So I don't know. It's a good group, and I'd be curious to see how it all shakes up. But yeah, you got to be pretty excited about the tight ends.
I do want to see them block better this year, though.
Yeah,
I do think the blocking left a little bit to be desired last season, so I want to see a step up there.
Yeah, part of that, I think, is just Theo Johnson is what he is. Like, he's a good blocker. He's not a great blocker. Also, Brenton Strange was such a good blocker that I think lowered, or the expectations are maybe a little too high. But yeah, I agree. Let's go with running backs. I'll start. I'll just say, if it wasn't for those last couple games, I would have been a little bit more concerned. But this is pretty ice cold for me. I'm feeling really good about the running backs. Really excited about what Andy Kotelnicki is going to be bringing in, and how he's going to continue to utilize those guys and get them in space. We did see them get in more space after Mike Yurcich left. We did see some explosion out of them. Nick Singleton definitely simplified things and got back on track. Katron Allen didn't have a bad year by any stretch. He was Mr. Consistent all year, doing his thing. But after those two, Shawn, I think is where it gets interesting, right? Cam Wallace, like, where's he at in his development? London Montgomery, is he 100% healthy now officially? Where are those two guys going to be at? And then, Quentin Martin. What's Quentin Martin going to be? Is he going to be a running back? Is he going to play early? Just a lot of questions after those two, Shawn. And you do lose Trey Potts, which kind of stinks. But now Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, they're veterans on this team, and they have got to be the leaders in that room.
I think it says a lot about how the staff feels about these running backs, that we weren't really even going after any running backs in the portal last year. So, or not last year, last month. So I think that tells you they feel they feel confident that one of London or Cam Wallace or Quentin Martin are going to be ready to step in at that number 3 spot. And I agree with you. I don't really know where Quentin Martin's going to be. I think ultimately he'll probably end up at running back, but I think Penn State's going to do a lot with him. He seems like the type of guy that in Andy Kotelnicki's system, he's going to do a lot of different things with. He's going to line up at a bunch of different spots just as a freshman. Maybe a little bit like how Derek Williams was used early in his career, lining him up at running back, lining him up at receiver. So I think you're gonna see quite a bit of Quentin Martin. But I mean, Corey Smith is there too. So I even though I think he's a very good candidate to redshirt, yeah, I think I feel pretty cool about this running back spot. I don't know if I'd say ice cold. That might be a little different than Corey on this one. Just because, I know Singleton finished the year strong, but he did struggle most of the year last year, in my view. I know James Franklin thinks he played better as a sophomore than he did as a freshman. In some ways he did, but I mean, I think if we're watching the same guy, I didn't see that. But to each their own.
Yeah, some fans, I think, definitely will just look at the stats too hard, and at the same time, I think sometimes Franklin's never going to say, "Yeah, he's having a crappy year,"
which is true. Yeah. I just disagree with them saying better. I was like, well, he could catch the ball better, but
he did.
I don't really know where else he was better at.
I think he improved as a blocker too, but again, you're running back at the end of the day.
Yeah, when you're averaging less than 3 yards a carry than you were the previous year, I think it's a bit of a step back. But he did finish the year strong, so that made me feel a lot better. I will say that.
All right, let's go corners. Well, I would say you lose Kalen King and you lose Johnny Dixon. They didn't have necessarily the best Senior Bowl outings. And you lose Daquan Hardy, which we're a huge Daquan Hardy fan club. So I would say I'm hot about this, given how the Peach Bowl went. Now I know Penn State's bringing in some transfers. AJ Harris, one of them, Kimber being the other one. Makes me feel a little bit better. But it's like when you throw ice into a pot of boiling water, like ice is just going to melt and the temperature's going to cool down a little bit, but you're still going to have to wait and see. And that's kind of where I'm at here. I don't doubt the development aspect. Like I think they're going to get there, but you got to question the depth a little bit. Is Cam Miller ready to play big time football? A lot of it. Remind me, Zion Tracy, is he ready to play big time football? Like those are your questions because they're gonna have to play a lot of football. So I'm saying pretty warm on this one, Shawn.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Corner is one of the big question marks on this team, maybe the biggest. And it's, people sometimes misinterpret what question mark means, but it's just a mystery because I could see the quarterback room being fine. And because there's a ton of talent there. And AJ Harris was a 5-star prospect, and Georgia fans were really bummed to see him go. And usually when guys transfer, I typically like to see what the opposing fans what their fans think of them, and they felt pretty good about AJ Harris and how he was going to develop. So I think he's going to help. James Franklin has talked about Cam Miller now for 2 years and how happy he's coming along. So I know he had although I think he had a couple of decent moments in the Peach Bowl, he had some not so good moments in the Peach Bowl too, and that's going to happen. I mean, he is his first start, and he was going against maybe the best passing quarterback we had played last season, and a very talented group of receivers. So yeah, not a position you want to be a first time starter in. And same thing with Zion Tracy. I mean, we've heard how well he competes. We saw him make a few plays on special teams. So I do think there's a bit of an it factor there and a little bit of bite. I think Bill Parcells once said, if they don't bite when they're puppies, they're not going to bite when they're when they're grown dogs, which I think is a good way to put it. And I saw some bite from Zion Tracy, and I think he's going to be fine. But you just wonder how far along he's going to be in his development, and if gonna be a guy could have potential, but is he going to be ready for to be a starter, to be a starting caliber corner? I think that remains to be seen. And then I think Kimber, I think he had some mixed results at Florida. I think there were some good things, there were some bad things. But I'm not really sure if we're going to be asking him to be a starter per se. But I do think he could be a depth piece. So, yeah, I think you have to – I think this has to be one of your warmer groups just because there's so much uncertainty here.
Right. Yeah, and, I think Cam Miller has some dog. I think Zion Tracy's got some dog too. Zion Tracy's a guy who basically earned his scholarship at Penn State by going to camps and beating up on some other Penn State targets at wide receiver at the time to earn that. So I think they've got it. They just, hadn't gone up against that. And honestly, I mean, who knows how well Kalen King would have done in those situations? Like, Kalen King hasn't had his best year. I mean, just be frank about it. And from an experience perspective, you think it would have helped, but they'll get there. And so, yeah, I'm curious about it, but a little bit nervous right now. If you're curious, Cam Miller won competitor of day one. If you're curious on that, let's wrap up the defense with linebackers. Shawn, we had one conversation about this already. Do you move Abdul Carter to the Sam? Do you bring in Tony Rojas at the will? And you have Kobe King at the Mike. One other thing I forgot to mention about Alex Tatch earlier, he's a box linebacker, just so everyone is aware. He's going to be playing. We're not going to be asking him to be out on the edge too much there. How much do you try to let Abdul Carter play freely while also needing him to play Sam? Interesting conversation there. But as far as temperature goes, I'm pretty cool. I feel pretty good. I think there could be some growing pains depending on how they go about certain things, and it's a new coordinator. But I think Tom Allen's a good teacher. I think he'll have them figured out. I'll just be curious. And you know what? We say Kobe King has the Mike spot locked, but new coach, like, we don't technically know that, right? I mean, theoretically, I know I don't want to scare fans, but theoretically, like, there could still be some open competition at Mike between Tyler Ellison and Kobe King, at least at this point. I don't agree with it. I'm just saying it's a new coach.
Theoretically, yes, but theoretically, gravity might not be real. So
no, don't. That's not a theoretically. That's not a theoretical.
No. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. But don't forget too, Tom Allen runs a 4.25, so at least he did it in Indiana. So I'm interested to see how exactly he goes about with his defense and fitting his personnel with what he wants to do. And every coordinator, every coach will always say, I'm going to fit my scheme to my personnel. And then how many times do you see that doesn't happen? See Vic Fangio with the Miami Dolphins.
Or they'll be super aggressive. Don't forget the attacking aggressive style.
Yeah, attacking aggressive style. We're gonna have multiple style offense and defense, and it's one thing to say it. It's another thing to do it. That they're very. I've noticed, like, they all say it, all of them, but most of them don't. Most of them do try.
Nobody's gonna say we are a laid back, on our heels defense.
Yeah, we just kind of see what happens and do our best out there. I kind of want to see somebody say that sometime. But yeah, they basically all say the same thing. And but still, the best coaches actually do it. And they do fit their personnel with what they have. See, Andy Reid. He could coach Patrick Mahomes. He could also coach Alex Smith. But then there are some coaches that just can't veer away from what they want, from what in their mind they want to do, and they can't coach that, and they can't coach that specifically. But I do have faith that Tom Allen's going to be able to do this. Like, there's one thing that he loves to coach, and it's linebackers. And even at Indiana, he always had great linebackers. So I have no reason to doubt he won't do the same thing at Penn State. So I feel pretty cool about this group because there's also a ton of talent there with Abdul Carter, with Tony Rojas, Kobe King, Dom DeLuca. I think there's a lot to feel good about.
Yeah, Dom is always fun to talk about. A little nervous about the Will depth, depending on what you do there. I guess you can always bump Carter back to Will and have Dom play if you need to.
And then our guy Kavion Keys too. I think you're going to see more of him this year.
I would hope so. I like me some Kavion Keys.
Yeah, Curtis Jacobs was talking him up at the Peach Bowl. He spoke glowingly about Kavion Keys and how good he's going to be.
It's a big year. Who am I thinking of, Shawn? Linebacker.
Tamir Robinson.
No, but it's kind of a big year. 1 year older guy than him.
Keon Wiley.
Yes. Big year for Keon Wiley.
And there's a good opportunity for him too, because like you said, new coach. Maybe he could make case to get more time at that Mike spot.
Yeah, and I don't know where he's at, right? Because he's bounced around. He's played almost all those positions. So where are they going to settle him at? Do you put him at the Sam? Do you put him at the Will? I don't know what you do. So be very curious. In my perfect world, you'd like to see Kobe King, Tamir Robinson as your 1-2 at Mike. Your Sam theoretically would be Abdul Carter and then Dom DeLuca, I guess. And then your Will, I guess, would be Tony Rojas and then Keon Wiley. I think would be your theoretically starting blue and white depth chart. And then see where Kavion Keys gets, see where some of the other younger guys go. But that's, I think, roughly where you're at. I just don't know where but I think it's a big year for Keon Wiley. Just wanted to mention him.
Yeah, definitely. And he's athletic enough to play multiple spots at linebacker. So
yeah.
He could definitely, this, like you said, we have a lot coming back, but there's still room to fit in because Curtis Jacobs did a lot for this defense last year that I don't think gets talked about enough. And you saw it in the Peach Bowl. When he wasn't playing, there was a huge difference at linebacker and being able to stop Judkins. So,
and then he came back in for a play and he made a stop right away.
He did. Yeah. So everybody talks about replacing Kalen King and Chop and a D size, and everybody kind of forgets that we have to replace Curtis Jacobs too. But that's going to be a big spot to replace.
Yeah. And just straight up, Abdul Carter has some great splash play ability. Not as consistent of a tackler as Curtis Jacobs if you're asking him to play that Sam spot. Maybe you don't. Maybe you put Dom DeLuca there just because he's more consistent at tackling. I don't know. You lose some on the edge, obviously, speed-wise. But it just depends, I guess, who you're playing and, what you need. But theoretically, Curtis Jacobs probably, at least at this point in Abdul Carter's career, 2 times better tackler than Abdul Carter.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I think Abdul Carter we all know how much talent the guy has, but there does need to be some more consistency in his game. And I do think he had a good year last year. It was good, but I think fans were expecting more than just good.
Right.
And this is his year to do it. Yeah. And a lot of that just comes with tackling better. So that's definitely something he can improve on.
There's just a handful of times where he just tackles a smidgen better. Things get a little bit better. All right. Overall coaching staff, Shawn, you want to throw a temp out there?
We need offensive line.
Oh, shoot. Thank you. Offensive line.
Like car insurance, man.
Like car insurance.
Now, Bowdy Insurance is health insurance.
Right.
Insurance.com, but
still taking ad reads for car insurance. Offensive line, to me, is hot. Straight up. I think I said this last week. You can't replace your left tackle, your right tackle, and your center and have me not at least a little bit concerned. I think there's some good steps in the right direction. We actually have a fan question that I was going to get to in a second. I think there's solutions, specifically at center and maybe right tackle, to feel better about, or left tackle. But I don't feel great about it. So I'm gonna say I'm not as hot as I am like a quarterback position or a cornerback position, but I'm warm. I'm warm for sure right now.
So you feel warmer about quarterback than offensive line?
Yes.
Okay, I was just wondering. Yeah. I think there are things that you could really that I like about this offensive line. Like we have three guys that I at least somewhat trust in Sal Warmley, in Vanga Ione, in JB Nelson. But then, like I said, you have to replace the center. So then I think you could have a discussion: do one of those guys kick the center? I know Nick Dawkins has paid his dues and is a well-respected guy in the team, but I think you have to have some competition there at center, and maybe look to one of those guards. And then offensive tackle, I mean, Drew Shelton played well at times, played well in the Rose Bowl, ended the 2022 season as basically the starting left tackle at that point, and started the Peach Bowl. But then you go to the right side, and okay, Nolan Rucci's there, but then what else do you have? I think there are tons of question marks. So yeah, I'm warmer on this than I guess I feel about the same way as I do about the quarterback, maybe. Probably right around the same warm level. And we also have to do receiver.
Yeah, that's right. Feel good. Like I think we'll be okay at center. I think we'll be okay at one of the tackle spots. I don't know who that like the tackle I feel great about. I assume it's gonna be Drew Shelton, but I think we'll be okay at least at one of them, right? But we're not even talking about like knock on wood, but we're not even talking about injuries or depth. I mean, again, we lost Landon Tangwall before the season even started. Like,
Guys get hurt on the offensive line.
yeah. And you can't and like last year you had the guys to make up for a lot of injuries. Don't feel that way this year nearly as much. So before we get to wide receivers, Shawn, Lambda on YouTube says outside of Wisconsin and maybe Minnesota will probably play a safety in the overhang role instead of a true Sam. Yeah, that's true. It just depends on the situation, right? If it's a running third down situation, I think you see Dom DeLuca out there. If it's more of a passing situation, you're right. Like they're going to probably go to a true nickel or dime look and take one of those guys or two of those guys off, depending on what they want to do. But who do you play then, right? If you go with a Jalen Reed and a KJ Winston, do you throw Zakee Wheatley out there right away? Like it's just how do you want to? Is it Jalen Reed going to be that guy that's always playing in the box? Kind of like I'm okay with that. It'd just be interesting to see how they play it. Can he play? Can he cover tight ends? I don't know. So there's some questions there, but I agree with what you're saying. I don't know if you have much of a choice if you feel like speed is an issue and you don't feel comfortable moving Abdul Carter from the Sam to the Will. It'll be an interesting conversation as we get into spring. I think, everyone talks about blue and white not being like you don't learn much. Well, okay, you don't learn maybe much from a like a player perspective on some of the starters and whatnot, but you learn a lot about how like we want to play defense, especially with new coordinators. Lambda also mentions he wants to see King Mack play there. I think that's a really good point. King Mack, big guy, would be able to do that there. That's a good point. I like that.
I do like the King Mack reference. I do like that. He's another guy that I thought might have played a little bit more last year. But he's gonna play a lot here by the time it's all said and done. And yeah, look at
Nelson
the teams
too.
Look at the teams we're playing. I mean, USC is on the schedule this year. UCLA, assuming Chip Kelly stays, they'd like to spread you out and use their athletes. Washington is going to do something similar, even without Kalen DeBoer. They're going to be with Jed Fish.
The Arizona offense was fun to watch last year.
Yeah, that's what Jed Fish does. So you're going to see, I'm expecting Ohio State to be, even though I think they're going to be more run heavy, even though Bill O'Brien's probably not going to be their offensive coordinator because he's probably going to Boston College, I still think they're going to be, I think they'll be better throwing the ball this year. But we'll see. They also lose Marvin Harrison Jr., so who the hell knows?
Who the hell knows?
But yeah, they're going to try to put their best guys on the field, period. And I think Tom Allen is very comfortable doing what you said, having that third safety on the field. I think he's more than comfortable doing that because that's a lot of what he did at Indiana.
Yep. All right, let's go to wide receiver. Talked about it a little bit already. I'm hot. I don't think there's another way to say it, right? I mean, you gotta have some question marks going here. You don't have a true number one. You don't have a true number two. You don't really know what you have right now. You don't know what you're gonna have coming out of the spring. I'm hot, but it's like almost like I'm blindfolded. Like I don't really know what the knob on the stove is set to because you don't know what you don't know. And right now I don't know. And I know some things, but I don't know enough based off of what the offense is going to try to do, like how much Julian Fleming makes an impact. Like, is Keandre Lambert-Smith one of those guys where if you have a number one across, he can be a great number two, just can't be a number one? Like, because he did some good things and has done some good things in his career. Maybe he just needs the heat off his back a little bit, and then he'll take off. I don't really know, but I'm hot. I just don't really know how hot I am, Shawn.
Yeah, I think you're a little crazy if you're not warm or hot. The wide receivers, they've been talked about ad nauseum, not just on here, but by pretty much everybody. But like you said, Keandre Lambert-Smith, I think this is a huge year for him. I think he had a pretty disappointing year last year, but there's a lot to grow from. And, it's not about dwelling on the past. It's about being able to get off the mat and keep going and, make yourself better. And that's where greatness really is, right? And it's not, success isn't just like this. It's like this. And yeah, there. But the key is to keep going up. And Andrew Lambert-Smith has a ton of talent, and I've been beating this drum for 2 years. He's the most talented receiver at Penn State. I still think that, even with Julian Fleming in the room, he is the most talented receiver at Penn State. If he could just be a little more mature, yeah, sky's the limit. He's going to be an NFL receiver. He could start in the NFL. I think he's that good, but it's just a matter of going and doing it. And I think
Just do it.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of talent in the room. Not just him. Caden Saunders, I think, is a really talented guy. Omari Evans, Julian Fleming. So the talent is there, but it's just about going and doing it. And part of that is quarterback's got to be better. OC's got to be better. So part of it is the quarterback and OC putting them in the right spots. But they also have to be better too. Because
everyone has to be better.
Yes, from a blocking perspective, from a consistency perspective, from route running, from effort, it's all got to be better from the receivers because none of it was good enough last year.
Easy enough. All right, let's get to some fan questions here. Let's stick with the offensive line since that one kind of came up first here. This is from Matty Ice, longtime listener to the show. Haven't heard much about Javen Williams. I feel like, is he in the mix for one of the tackle spots, or do you think he has a better chance competing for an interior spot in the future? Well, we talked about Anthony Dunca a lot, and we thought Anthony Dunca, when he arrived on campus, was going to be an interior guy. Next thing you know, he's playing right tackle in the Peach Bowl. I don't really know what that means specifically for Javen Williams, but it can be good. It just can't be, right? Javen Williams and Alec Burkmeyer were originally supposed to start on the outside and then maybe work their way in if it wasn't a good fit. Nobody was even talking about Anthony Dunca going from the inside out. So I'm not in those rooms. I don't know what's going on, But as far as like, is he in the mix? Okay, let me just say it this way, because I believe Chimney Ono came in the Peach Bowl as well. So you're potentially saying that Javen Williams is your number 4 offensive tackle, maybe right now. I'm sorry, with Nolan Rucci, he might be number 5 right now. So my 2 cents on the matter, which again, we're at February 5th here, is he should start looking in the interior. That's just my 2 cents. For an interior guy, he would be an insanely athletic guy that could do some serious damage. But I would find it hard to believe he's that far behind, say, the Chimney Onos and the Anthony Dunkas of the world. I just couldn't imagine he's far behind. But I understand the question given that he was such a highly rated guy coming out of high school. But Shawn, I mean, just straight up, like, it's offensive line. So he's been here for a year. It's not even close to the time to pull the alarm bell and freak out, right? Like, there's plenty of times to get this thing turned around. A lot of offensive linemen don't even play until their 3rd year on campus. So I'm not freaking out by any stretch of the imagination. But when you compare it to Anthony Dunka, who also is in his class and did play in the Peach Bowl, then, okay, now you're like, okay, well, wait a second. Like, why? But that's all I got, Shawn. I don't know. The quick answer to this is I would say he has a better chance at the interior spot based on the fact that he's probably number 5 offensive tackle right now. And I haven't heard much either.
Yeah, I remember watching Javen Williams highlight, and it was very impressive. But something to keep in mind. When you're a mauler in high school and you're violent, you're playing fast, and that doesn't always mean, and sometimes it could be contrary. It could be on the contrary, like you might not be technically sound. And that could be an issue with Javen. Maybe he needs to work on technique better. And technique is everything in college football. High school, you can get away with poor technique, 100%, because you're bigger than everybody. You're more physical than everybody. You're more athletic than everybody. And Javen was a monster in high school. But you don't really know how to play football. And that's something that you need a coach for. You need a college coach for it to go and develop you. And Trout has proven he could develop you. But it might just take some time. And that's okay. Now I think he projects more as an interior offensive lineman, partly because, like I said, he's a mauler. He's gonna go get after. He's gonna make a living pancaking linebackers. That's kind of what I always saw, even last season when we first got him. That's kind of what I always saw with Javen Williams. You know, somebody that's physical, and not that you can't be physical as a tackle. Of course you could be, but you could really focus on it on those 3rd and 1s, 3rd and 2s, running behind Javen Williams, but picking up a few yards. So I think he ends up on the inside as well.
Thank you, Matty Ice, for the question. As always, let's go to this other question here. Oh, nope, that was last week. Sorry. Oh, nope, that was none weeks either. We did have another question. Oh, and I know what it was. Oh, here we go. Here it is. Found it. All right. This is kind of an interesting question, Shawn, so hold on to your seat. Question from Lucas Powers, who always is asking questions kind of outside of the box. Longtime listener to the show. When I say longtime listener now, like we're talking about like a year and a half at least of listening. Like that is now the expectation for a longtime listener. So if you've asked questions and you're not considered a longtime listener, you're like, hey, why am I not a longtime listener? These guys have been asking questions, a lot of them, for a year and a half, 2 years. So longtime listener to the show, Lucas Powers says, hypothetical question for you. College football moves to a general manager coach structure similar to the pro sports. Would you appoint James Franklin as a general manager or as a coach? Now, it's interesting, and why this question probably comes up is a lot of people say, "Hey, James Franklin can't coach. He is a game manager. He is a CEO type coach, and he's only going to be as good as his assistant coaches." Now, whether you agree with that or not, that's what some people tend to say. That's probably where this kind of ammunition, this question kind of came from. So, Shawn, would you hire James Franklin as your coach or as your GM?
Both.
Let's assume money's not included in this, by the way, just for the sake of it.
I actually think sometimes, and I've been pretty critical of Frank the last couple months, like where he recruits is typically where his teams end. So what I mean by that is if the team was like number 11 in recruiting, typically we're going to finish around number 11 in the country. Like we don't, like people talk about Franklin like we recruit in the top 3 every year. Like, oh, he's a great recruiter, but he's a terrible coach. Not really. Like, I don't think he's as good of a recruiter as people say. And part of that is due to some structural things at Penn State. But, like, I also don't think he's as terrible as a coach as some people say. So the answer, like a lot of things, somewhere in the middle. So, knowing that, I would probably take him, and it's a good question, I would probably take him as a coach. And the reason I would take him as a coach is one of the things he does a very good job of is instilling a culture and building his team and 365 days a year, and he's big into that and has a good idea on the big picture. And that's really it. That's why I would probably take him as a head coach rather than a general manager. But an excellent argument could be made that he'd be a better general manager than a head coach because he is a very good talent evaluator as well.
Talent evaluator would be the only thing that I scream and shout about maybe being a GM, but I agree. I'm going coach. And I agree with what you said. Like, he is a good recruiter. I think he's a great recruiter, given where Penn State is, and honestly, I don't want to say the depth of the area hasn't been as good in the recruiting lately, but there was some really bad Pennsylvania cycles, with all things considered. And he was able to go out a couple years and go snag some people from a lot of different places. So give him some credit there. You can obviously see when COVID happened, when he wasn't able to get people on campus, how that made a massive difference in the recruiting. But you're right. Like, we're recruiting borderline top 10 and we're finishing borderline top 10. I think Josh Pate said it all the time. Like, he's a very rated coach. He's not an overrated coach. He's not an underrated coach. He's a very rated coach. He's literally doing kind of what everyone expects them to do. Beat everybody but Ohio State and Michigan. I don't think a lot of people, like, I'm not trying to defend him in the sense of he's doing enough, because I don't want people to think that way, that I think that way either. But people do not put enough stock into winning the games you're supposed to win. Because, and Franklin said this before, this might have been at a radio show one time, but he said straight up, like, everybody wants to talk about winning the big game. And he's like, yeah, we want to win the big games too. But if you win the big games, but then you lose the clunkers, then none of it matters. You got to be able to do both. And yeah, Penn State hasn't got over the hump and won the big time games, but in recent years, they also haven't lost the people that they're not supposed to lose to, which 3-4 years ago, everyone's like, oh, Franklin's due for a clunker. You can't even say that anymore, which I know is not enough. But in the grand scheme of being a coach or a GM, I want a coach who's not going to lose the games. Think of the Mike Tomlins of the world right now, who lose to everyone they're not supposed to all the time. James Franklin's not doing that. And so, yeah, I would take him as a coach as well. Not perfect by any stretch, but I do think he's a good coach. I know there's maybe some time management questions, but I think for the most part, he gets most of those right. I know there's some questions about 2-point conversion stuff and analytics. Talk about that another time. But all intents and purposes, I'd take him as a coach. Good question, Lucas Powers. These are the questions, by the way. Now that we're in the off season, if you asked us a question before and we didn't answer it because maybe it was a little bit out there, that was probably because it was in the middle of the season. We were just trying to keep a little bit more focus. Focus is out the window now, ladies and gentlemen. Ask whatever the hell you want.
It's the off season, man.
Yeah.
There's no focus. We're focused on everything.
We're focused on
and
nothing.
Everything and nothing all at the same time.
Exactly. I do have 2 more questions that I did not get into. Blame Mr. Mister because he asked last second. And I usually don't do this for people, so don't think this is going to be a typical thing. But for Mr. Mister, I'll pretty much do anything he asks me to do. He says, if you had to pick one offensive player and one defensive player off of last year's team to build around, who would it be? The players don't have to be returning for the upcoming season. So basically anyone who entered the transfer portal, God, I can't speak today, and or went to the NFL. Who would you want to have back for this year on offense or defense?
To have back?
Or did it have to be from this last class? Yeah, last year's team.
Well, offense, so
yeah,
having a rock solid offensive tackle, left tackle, it's a luxury. And it's a luxury that I don't know if Penn State fans fully enjoyed, because again, it's like car insurance. You're just gonna be like, oh yeah, Olu was there. But then as soon as we have like some guy who's mediocre at left tackle, it's all they talk about, and that's all we'll be hearing about from the fans on Twitter. And
it could even be good, and it won't even be enough.
Yeah. Like people still complain about Caden Wallace last year because like he wasn't Olu, and it's like, guys, Caden Wallace is playing really good right now.
Had a good Senior Bowl too.
Yeah,
whatever he was at.
He had a very good season, and people still complain about him. So that's just kind of the way it is with offensive tackles. You play really well. People barely even talk about you. You play poorly. It's all people talk about. Defense. Chop. I mean, was anybody more disruptive maybe in the country than him? I think as time gets closer, like right now, I think I see him in a lot of mock drafts, and who knows how much they mean, especially before free agency. I think he's in the 20s. I think he's going to go up.
Yeah.
Like, he's a guy that if he's a stock, I'm putting a lot of money in right now. While the stock it's not low. He's a top 20. He's a top 25 pick, but I think he can go up to the top 10. Like, I think he's good. When he's tested, people are going to fall in love with the guy, especially when they put the film on in conjunction with the testing. Yeah, he's going to shoot way up. So I go Chop and Olu. Maybe a bit of a cop-up because they were probably our 2 best players last year.
A little bit.
But I had to put some ice on Cory here. Or turn the heat up on him, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah, if I can't take Olu, I'd probably honestly take Caden Wallace on offense. Or honestly, even a Hunter Norzad, just having someone else on there that I feel good about would go a long way. One spot. Even if I'd probably take Caden Wallace, because then you at least have one tackle spot figured out. And now you're telling me Nolan Rucci, Drew Shelton have to figure out the other one? That's a way better situation to have to figure out. So that's probably what I'd choose if I can't choose Olu. I'd probably take Caden Wallace, which is kind of the cop-out to the cop-out. But defensively, I think it's a little bit more interesting. I see the Chop Robinson. I could go Disa Isaac. I think, honestly, just based off of depth, though, I'd have to go with Chop Robinson, with Johnny Dixon. And could say Kalen King. I think Johnny Dixon had a better year. Johnny Dixon also gives you a little bit something from a pass rushing perspective. He's a little bit scrappier. I think I'd take Johnny Dixon. Then you feel a little bit better about the cornerback position as well. Again, having one guy back there at least makes you feel a little bit better about not everyone having to step up right into defending number 1 wide receivers. So that'd be my guess. That'd be my 2 guys. We had another question from Tyler on Instagram, who is another longtime listener. You can also message us via Instagram too, if you want to ask questions that way. This question is actually asked the night of the podcast, but this is kind of a crazy one, Shawn. So don't feel like we have to talk about it too much. He says, crazy hypothetical out here. Would James Franklin consider resigning to wait for college football to correct itself, schedule, etc., then re-enter when there's more work-life balance? Appreciate, as he says, I appreciate it, gentlemen. I don't think so, to answer it straight up. But I think that's more because James Franklin likes the chaos. Like, he's just one of those guys that enjoys the chaos. He enjoys the process. He enjoys, like, I think he gets excited about it. I don't think he's a guy that you have to be worried about that with. He's not the Bill O'Brien type, which I feel like we talked about that last week, where you might have to worry about somebody get kind of burned out. He's just not that personality. So I'm not worried about him. I'd be more worried about, I don't know, the Paul Chrysts of the world. I don't know.
Yeah, Chip Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah, typically, yeah, like a lot of these college coaches, you kind of see it in their press conferences. They kind of look like presidents after they served for 7 years, and that you could see them just aging right before your eyes, and their hair is falling out, or their hair is really gray.
Yeah.
And James Franklin's hair already fell out, so and he
You don't have to worry about that.
Yes, exactly. So maybe it's a little harder to tell, but no, like he typically kind of takes these things in stride. Like he will say sometimes that things need to be fixed, but I think that's more about the game itself.
Yeah.
And do I think he's worried about the game? Yeah, I think every coach is, because you're losing. Like, take a guy like, and believe me, Deion Barnes did a great job this year, but John Scott Jr. He just said, I'm done, and went to the NFL, and I can't really blame him. And he's just a line coach. Like, head coaches are doing this. The guy at
Hafley.
Boston College, Jeff Hafley, he just took a coordinator job in the NFL. Like,
yeah.
I know BC's not a huge job, but that's a Power 5 job. And he's just like, I'm done. I'm going Packers defensive coordinator. You just
Power
have
4.
never, you just have Power 4, you just have never seen this before, ever. Like, that this is uncharted territory that we're in now. And I think there's a lot of concern about the game from all these coaches. And yeah, I don't think you'd have to worry about Franklin stepping down or becoming an offensive coordinator somewhere. But there are coaches
hasn't called plays in a long time.
Yeah. I mean, Franklin is a.
Oh, I'm sorry. Fans still think he's calling all the plays. I forgot.
That's true, because Franklin is a better, and I know fans aren't big on James Franklin right now, a lot of you. He's a much better head coach than an offensive coordinator. I mean, I think that's a pretty widely accepted thing. Like, at Maryland, his offenses were all right, but he was seen as more of a head coach. Ricky Ronnie's the same way. Ricky Ronnie's doing a very good job at Old Dominion, but at Penn State, he was all right as an offensive coordinator. But there are some guys that are just more suited to be head coaches, just like there's some guys more suited to be OCs. So I don't think he'll ever be a coordinator, and I don't think he'd ever resign because he didn't like the way that college football is going. That's just not him.
I agree with that. Fun question, though, Tyler. Thank you. We're done.
Very fun.
We put together a hour and 45-minute podcast on May 5th or February 5th. We didn't even talk about it because it's not going to matter. But early signing day is Wednesday. Or, sorry, official signing day is Wednesday.
Oh, yeah.
But Penn State's pretty much done, if anyone was curious about that. So.
Yeah, we're not getting anybody else, and I don't even think anybody was on campus for class of 2024. Like,
I don't think so.
I just think Franklin called it a day in September, and that's fine.
October or November, December.
Yeah, you get everybody you want. Fine with me. Like, I know last couple of years there were some late additions, but it doesn't have to be every year. And I think they're going to be. You have to keep spots open for the portal too. So you have to balance numbers out.
That's a question too, right? Like, you got to think, like, do you take a chance on somebody that you hadn't evaluated very much at this point,
Right.
or do you just wait for a more portal guarantee?
Right, because we talked about there'll be attrition after spring. Well, maybe there won't be too, because there was barely any after the season. Maybe we only lose like one guy, and then you're kind of up a creek without a paddle. Then
I don't know where the numbers sit, but I think we need to lose a couple. I think.
yeah, then you may see some guys. I went to Catholic school, and they never expelled anybody. But what they would do is they would ask them to leave. So
They'd hold the door open for them.
Yes, but you were never expelled at Holy Cross. You were just asked to leave. So I think there's a very similar thing at Penn State as well, and every other school in the country.
We'll help you find another opportunity.
Right. Yes.
Hey, speaking of opportunity, we do have merch on sale at the Mercury store. There's a link in the bio. There's a link on our link tree on Twitter. Go buy some Hackenberg is my boss merch. Supposed to have some more merch. We got to ask management where the other merch is at.
Yeah, we have some other things in the works.
But thank you guys so much for listening. You made it this far in the show. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to you soon. Won't be back probably until not this Wednesday, but the next Wednesday. But until then, thank you so much for listening. I'm Corey Lestochi. That's Shawn Kane. Until next time, see you later from Hardcore Penn State Football.